The first sensation was cold. Not the numbing cold of space or the sharp bite of winter air, but something deeper, a cold that had settled into his bones over centuries of dreamless sleep. Marcus felt his consciousness drift upward like a bubble, rising through thick syrup, awareness returning in fragments. His fingers twitched first, then his toes. The membrane surrounding him pulsed with a faint blue light, responding to his stirring life signs. Through the translucent walls of his cocoon, shadows moved, tall, graceful figures with elongated limbs and faces that seemed carved from moonlight. "He stirs," came a voice, musical and haunting. The words formed in his mind rather than his ears, carried by the neural link that had sustained him through 3 centuries of artificial hibernation. "The human awakens." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat felt raw and unused. The cocoon began to dissolve around him, its bioorganic walls melting away like morning mist. He tumbled forward onto a smooth, pearl-like surface, gasping as real air filled his lungs for the first time in 300 years. The chamber was vast and circular, its walls covered in living circuits that pulsed with soft light. But it was the beings surrounding him that captured his attention. The Viridians were even more beautiful than he remembered, their skin translucent and silver, their eyes deep pools of starlight. Yet something was wrong. Their usual serene composure was cracked, replaced by something he had never seen in them before. Fear. "Welcome back, Marcus of Earth," said the tallest of them, her voice carrying undertones of desperation. "I am still called Luna, though much has changed in your absence." Marcus struggled to sit up, his muscles weak from centuries of disuse. "How long?" he croaked. 307 of your years," Luna replied. "We had hoped never to wake you. The agreement was that you would sleep until natural death claimed you, a gesture of peace between our peoples after the war ended." The war. Memories flooded back, the desperate conflict between Earth's forces and the Viridian Empire, the bitter stalemate that had consumed both civilizations, the final peace treaty that had made him a living symbol of reconciliation. He had volunteered to enter their healing cocoon, to spend his remaining years in their care, as proof that humans and Viridians could coexist. "But peace is broken," Luna continued, her luminous eyes reflecting centuries of sorrow. "A new enemy has come. They call themselves the Devourers, and they consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but void in their wake. They have already taken 12 of our core worlds." Marcus felt strength returning to his limbs as the cocoon's final regenerative compounds worked through his system. "Why wake me? What can one human do against something that powerful?" Luna's expression grew even more desperate. "Because they fear you. We do not understand why, but when our scouts mention the human species, the Devourers retreat. They whisper your kind's name in their communications like a curse. We have tried to understand this phenomenon, but our logic fails us." Standing. Now Marcus felt the weight of 3 centuries pressing on his shoulders. His uniform had been preserved, his weapons maintained. The Viridians had kept their word, caring for him as promised. But now they needed something more than peace. They needed hope. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Sarge's Tale Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. "How many Viridian worlds remain?" Marcus asked, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. 23, Luna whispered. "We were once masters of over 200 star systems. Now we are refugees in our own empire." Marcus nodded grimly. 300 years of peace, and it had come to this. But as he looked at Luna's desperate face, he felt something stir within him. Not just the soldier he had been, but something deeper. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their weapons or their technology. It was their refusal to give up, even when all logic said they should. "Then we'd better get started," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Show me these Devourers, let's see what they're so afraid of." The bridge of the Viridian flagship Luminous Dawn hummed with barely contained energy, its crystalline surfaces reflecting the pale faces of the crew. Marcus stood at the center of the command deck, still adjusting to the changes 3 centuries had wrought. The ship itself was beautiful beyond human imagination, grown rather than built, its organic curves pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carried information faster than any computer. Captain Arya, Luna's younger sister, gestured toward the main display, where a three-dimensional map of local space rotated slowly. Red zones marked devourer-controlled territory, spreading like an infection across what had once been the heart of Viridian civilization. This was the Kellar system, Arya explained, her melodic voice tight with grief. Home to 40 billion souls. The Devourers arrived 6 months ago. She touched a control and the display zoomed in. Where planets should have been, only empty space remained. Not even debris, just void. They consumed everything. The star itself burns dimmer now, as if they drained its very essence. Marcus studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had spent decades fighting impossible odds. During the Human Viridian War, he had been known for seeing patterns others missed, for finding weaknesses in seemingly perfect defenses. But this was unlike anything he had encountered. "How do they attack?" he asked. "Like nothing we understand," replied Commander Vale, the ship's tactical officer. His usual Viridian composure had been replaced by something approaching panic. "They do not send fleets or armies. Instead, reality itself seems to fold around their presence. Our most powerful weapons pass through them as if they were shadows, yet their touch unmakes matter at the quantum level." Marcus walked closer to the display, his boots clicking against the biometal deck. The Viridians moved silently, their natural grace making his human movements seem crude by comparison. Yet none of them stepped away from him. If anything, they seemed to draw comfort from his presence. "You said they fear humans," Marcus mused. "Have you tried to understand why?" Luna approached, carrying a data crystal that glowed with stored information. "We have analyzed every encounter, every whispered communication we have intercepted. When they speak of your species, they use terms that translate to the ones who break patterns and chaos bringers. Our linguists believe these are not insults, but expressions of genuine terror." Marcus accepted the crystal, feeling its warmth pulse against his palm. The Viridians had always been logical, methodical in their approach to problems. It was what had made the original war so devastating, two completely different philosophies of existence clashing across the stars. Humans fought with passion and unpredictability, while Viridians waged war with mathematical precision. "Pattern breakers," he repeated thoughtfully. "That's actually not a bad description of humanity." "We do not understand," Arya admitted. "Your species seems chaotic, yes, but why would beings capable of consuming stars fear chaos?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Because we're not just chaotic, we're adaptably chaotic. Every time the universe tries to put us in a box, we find a way to break out of it. We're the species that looked at the laws of physics and decided some of them were more like guidelines." He paused, studying the red zones on the display. "Show me their attack patterns." Every single one, from the first contact to the most recent. For the next several hours, Marcus immersed himself in the data. The Viridians worked alongside him, their luminous fingers dancing over control surfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. Gradually, a picture began to emerge. The Devourers were indeed methodical, but in a way that was almost ritualistic. They approached each system from the same dimensional angle, consumed matter in the same sequence, and left the same kind of void behind. It was efficient, elegant, and utterly predictable once you understood the pattern. "There," Marcus said finally, pointing to a specific data stream. "They're not invincible. They're just operating on a level you're not used to thinking about." Luna leaned closer, her starlight eyes reflecting the display's glow. "What do you see that we have missed?" "They're quantum entities," Marcus explained. "They exist in a state of controlled probability, which is why your weapons pass through them. But that also means they're vulnerable to quantum uncertainty, to true randomness." Arya's expression grew hopeful for the first time since his awakening. "Can this knowledge help us fight them?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe. But first I need to understand why they're so afraid of humans specifically. There's something we're missing, something about our species that makes us their natural enemy." As if summoned by his words, an alarm began to sound throughout the ship. The display shifted, showing new movement in the void. A section of space was beginning to fold in on itself, reality bending like heated metal. "They come," Vale announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "A devourer manifests in the Nexus system. 3 billion Viridians live there." Marcus felt his old instincts surge to life. 300 years of sleep, and the universe was still finding ways to test humanity's resolve. "How long until we can get there?" 18 hours at maximum. "Velocity," Arya replied. "Then let's go save some lives," Marcus said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never learned how to give up. "And maybe we'll figure out what makes humans so terrifying to cosmic horrors." The luminous dawn dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of the Nexus system, its bioorganic hull shimmering as it adjusted to normal space-time. Marcus stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the railing as he stared at the scene before them. The Nexus system had been one of the Viridians' greatest achievements, 7 garden worlds orbiting a binary star, connected by a network of space, elevators and orbital cities that gleamed like jewelry against the cosmos. Now half of it was simply gone. Where the outer 3 planets had been, space itself looked wrong. Not black, but somehow less than black, as if the very concept of existence had been carefully excised from reality. The binary stars flickered erratically, their fusion processes stuttering as something vast and incomprehensible fed on their nuclear fire. "By the ancient light," Luna whispered beside him, "we are too late for the outer worlds." Marcus watched the display with grim fascination. The Devourer wasn't a ship or creature in any sense he could understand. It was more like a living equation, a mathematical impossibility that had somehow achieved consciousness. Reality bent around it in impossible ways, creating visual paradoxes that made his human brain ache to process. "The inner worlds still exist," he observed. "Why hasn't it consumed them yet?" Commander Vale manipulated the sensors, bringing the image into sharper focus. "Our readings suggest it is feeding slowly, converting matter to energy in a specific sequence. Each planet contains unique quantum signatures. Perhaps it requires time to properly digest them." "Or maybe it's savoring the meal," Marcus muttered. The thought sent a chill down his spine, but it also sparked an idea. "How long do we have before it reaches the 4th planet?" "Approximately 6 hours at its current rate of consumption," Arya replied from the captain's station. Marcus nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. During the war, he had earned a reputation for desperate gambles that somehow worked out. The Viridians had called it human luck, but Marcus knew better. It wasn't luck, it was the willingness to try things that seemed impossible. "I need to talk to it," he announced. The bridge fell silent. Every Viridian turned to stare at him with expressions of polite disbelief. "Talk to the Devourer?" Luna asked carefully. "Marcus, that entity exists partially outside our dimensional framework. Communication may be impossible." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but you said they know about humans. They fear us for some reason. That means they understand us well enough to be afraid. And if they understand us, maybe we can understand them." He turned to face the assembled crew. "I know it sounds crazy. Hell, it is crazy. But sometimes crazy is exactly what the universe needs." Captain Arya stepped forward, her luminous features creased with worry. "Even if communication were possible, the quantum distortions around the entity would tear apart any conventional vessel. Our strongest shields would fail within minutes of approach." Marcus smiled grimly. "Then it's a good thing I'm not conventional." For the next 2 hours, Marcus worked with the ship's engineers to modify one of their smaller scout vessels. The Viridian's biotechnology was remarkably adaptable, responding to his suggestions with an eagerness that surprised him. They incorporated random number generators into the shield matrix, created quantum uncertainty fields around the hull, and installed equipment that could project pure chaos into the surrounding space. "This should not work," muttered Engineer Kess as he watched Marcus make final adjustments to the communication array. "The principles you are applying contradict our understanding of physics." "Exactly," Marcus replied, connecting another impossible circuit. "The Devourers exist in a state of controlled probability. They can handle any logical response, any predictable pattern. But humans excel at being unpredictable. Luna appeared, at his shoulder, her presence both comforting and alien. You speak of chaos as if it were a weapon. In a way it is, Marcus explained, running diagnostics on his jury-rigged systems. The universe tends toward entropy, toward randomness and decay. Most species fight against that tendency, trying to create order and meaning. But humans, we learn to surf the wave of chaos instead of fighting it. The modified scout ship hummed, with barely contained energy, its systems fluctuating in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Marcus climbed into the pilot's seat, feeling the familiar weight of desperate responsibility settle on his shoulders. If this fails, Arya began. It won't, Marcus interrupted with more confidence than he felt. And if it does, at least we'll have learned something useful. As the scout ship launched from the luminous dawn, Marcus felt the universe shift around him. The chaos generators created a bubble of pure uncertainty, making his vessel's position and velocity quantum indeterminate. To any observer, including cosmic entities that existed in controlled probability states, he would appear as nothing more than random noise, the kind of meaningless fluctuation that even gods couldn't predict. The Devourer loomed ahead, an impossibility, wrapped in the remains of 3 worlds. As Marcus approached, he began broadcasting on every frequency his modified communication array could reach. "Hello," he transmitted into the void. "My name is Marcus, I'm human, and I think we need to talk." For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality hiccuped, space folded, and suddenly Marcus found himself facing something that his mind couldn't quite process, a presence vast and ancient, made of living mathematics and crystallized hunger. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the weight of consumed civilizations. "Human," it whispered, and the word carried undertones of genuine terror. "Why do you not fear us?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Because fear is just another pattern, and we humans are really good at breaking patterns." The conversation that followed existed outside normal space and time, conducted in a realm where thought became reality and intent shaped the fundamental forces of the universe. Marcus found himself standing on what appeared to be a crystalline platform, suspended in an ocean of living starlight, facing an entity that defied every law of physics he understood. The Devourer manifested as a constantly shifting geometric impossibility, sometimes appearing as a vast eye made of collapsed stars, other times as a geometric pattern that seemed to extend into dimensions his human brain couldn't process. Its voice resonated through his consciousness like the dying songs of galaxies. "For eons, beyond counting, we have consumed the ordered civilizations of this universe," it explained, its words carrying the weight of cosmic truth. "We feed on pattern, on predictability, on the desperate attempts of matter to organize itself into meaning. But your species, you are the antithesis of everything we understand." Marcus stood his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to flee. The chaos generators in his modified ship created a protective bubble of uncertainty around him, making him appear as a quantum ghost to the entity's senses. "You're afraid of us," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Afraid is insufficient," the Devourer replied, its form rippling with something that might have been emotion. "We who have devoured the dreams of gods themselves find in humanity something we cannot categorize, cannot predict, cannot consume. You are living paradoxes, matter that refuses to follow the rules that govern existence." Marcus felt a sudden, understanding dawn. It's not just that we're unpredictable, it's that we make everything around us unpredictable too. The entity's form contracted, becoming more solid and somehow more frightened. "Yes, where humans walk, the ordered patterns of reality begin to fray. Your very presence introduces quantum uncertainty into stable systems. You are infectious. But that doesn't explain why you're consuming Viridian worlds," Marcus pressed. "They're not human, but they have been touched by humanity," the Devourer replied, its voice carrying notes of desperate hunger. "The peace treaty between your species and theirs created a quantum entanglement. Your chaos has begun to influence their ordered thoughts. Soon they too will become unpredictable, and our feeding will become impossible. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together. The Viridians had always been perfectly logical, their society built on mathematical principles and predictable behaviors. But 3 centuries of peace with humanity had changed them in subtle ways. They had learned to appreciate art for its own sake, to value emotional connections over pure efficiency. Without realizing it, they had become slightly more human. "So, you're trying to consume them before the infection spreads," Marcus concluded. "We must," the entity replied, its form beginning to expand again. Already other species speak of human courage and creativity, as if these were virtues rather than symptoms of quantum madness. "The pattern plague must be contained." Marcus smiled grimly. "Too late for that. Humans have been spreading chaos across the galaxy for centuries. Every species we've made contact with, every alliance we've formed, every enemy we've faced, we've left a little bit of our unpredictability behind." The Devourer's response was a sound like reality screaming. "No, it cannot be. We have consumed entire galactic clusters to maintain the ordered structure of existence. We will not allow your chaos to unmake the very foundations of the universe." "But that's the thing about chaos," Marcus said, feeling the chaos generators around him pulse with random energy. "You can't fight it with more order. The harder you try to control it, the more unpredictable it becomes." To demonstrate his point, Marcus did something completely irrational. He began to laugh. The sound was pure human absurdity, a biological response to stress that served no logical purpose, a noise that conveyed no useful information, an action that made no strategic sense. And yet, as his laughter echoed through the impossible space, Marcus watched the Devourer recoil as if struck. "Stop," it pleaded, its crystallized form beginning to fragment. "Your chaos song burns our essence. We cannot process such meaningless meaning." Marcus laughed harder. "That's the point. Humans don't need everything to make sense. We can find joy in absurdity, hope in hopelessness, victory in defeat. We're the species that looked at an infinite, uncaring universe and decided to tell it." "Jokes!" The platform beneath his feet began to crack, reality reasserting itself as the Devourer's control wavered. Around them, the impossible realm started to collapse back into normal space-time. "If we cannot consume you," the entity said, its voice growing distant, "then we must flee. The chaos plague must not spread further." "Where will you go?" Marcus asked, still grinning with human audacity. "Beyond the galactic rim. To the void, spaces where no patterns exist to break. We will wait until the universe grows cold and random, then perhaps we can feed again." As the vision faded and Marcus found himself back in his scout ship, he felt a strange mixture of triumph and sympathy. The Devourers weren't evil. They were just trying to maintain their understanding of how reality should work. But the universe had room for both order and chaos, pattern and randomness. His communication system crackled to life. "Marcus!" Luna's voice carried relief and urgency. "The entity is withdrawing. The quantum distortions are collapsing. What did you do?" Marcus looked out at the space where half the Nexus system had been, already seeing signs of the Devourer's retreat. Matter was beginning to coalesce again, not as planets, but as the raw material from which new worlds could be born. "I had a conversation," he replied, "and I reminded the universe why chaos is just as important as order. The aftermath of the Devourer's retreat was unlike anything the Viridians had ever witnessed." As Marcus's scout ship returned to the luminous dawn, space itself seemed to exhale, a quantum sigh of relief that rippled through local reality. Where the consumed outer planets had been, clouds of stellar matter began to coalesce, as if the universe was attempting to heal the wounds left by cosmic hunger. On the bridge, the assembled crew watched in wonder as their instruments registered the impossible. Matter was spontaneously organizing itself into increasingly complex patterns. Not the rigid mathematical structures the Devourers had consumed, but chaotic, beautiful arrangements that seemed to pulse with new possibilities. "The quantum foam is stabilizing into novel configurations," reported Commander Vale, his usual composure cracked by awe. "These formations should not be possible according to our physics models." Marcus stood at the center of the bridge, still feeling the residual effects of his otherworldly conversation. The chaos generators in his modified Ship had left him quantum entangled with the uncertainty fields, making him appear slightly translucent to Viridian sensors. He was becoming something between human and possibility, a living bridge between order and chaos. "Your physics models assume the universe wants to be predictable," he replied, watching the stellar clouds dance in patterns that hurt to analyze. "But maybe it's just been waiting for permission to be creative." Luna approached him carefully, her luminous features reflecting concern. "Marcus, our medical scanners show your quantum signature is changing. The exposure to the Devourer's realm may have had lasting effects." He nodded, not surprised. "I can feel it. It's like being tuned to receive a radio station that broadcasts pure possibility." He paused, studying the readouts. "But I don't think it's dangerous. If anything, I feel more complete." Captain Arya joined them, her expression mixing relief with uncertainty. "The other Devourer manifestations across our territory have begun withdrawing as well. Whatever you accomplished here has caused a chain reaction, but we must understand, will they return?" Marcus considered the question, drawing on the strange new awareness that hummed in his consciousness. The conversation with the Devourer had left him with insights that operated below the level of rational thought, knowledge encoded in quantum uncertainty itself. "Not for a very long time," he said finally. "They're retreating to the spaces between galaxies, waiting for the universe to grow cold and random enough that chaos stops being infectious." "Infectious?" Luna repeated the word with fascination, rather than fear. "They were right about one thing," Marcus explained, moving to the main display. "Contact with humanity does change other species, not in obvious ways, but in subtle shifts of thinking. The willingness to try impossible things, to find meaning in randomness, to laugh in the face of cosmic horror." He gestured to the crew around them. "Look at yourselves. 300 years ago, Viridians would never have awakened a human warrior to fight an incomprehensible enemy. You would have tried to understand the threat logically, respond with mathematical precision, but instead you chose the chaotic option. You woke me up and hoped for the best." Engineer Kess stepped forward, his bioluminescent circuits pulsing, with what Marcus had learned to recognize as Viridian embarrassment. "Our decision was based on careful analysis of probability matrices and risk assessment algorithms." Marcus grinned. "Was it? Or did you wake me up because you were scared and desperate and willing to try anything, even if it didn't make sense?" The bridge fell silent as the crew contemplated this question. Finally, Captain Arya spoke. "Perhaps both. Our logic suggested you were our best option, but our emotions demanded we act, even without complete understanding. And that," Marcus said triumphantly, "is exactly what I'm talking about. Emotions, intuition, the willingness to act without complete information. Those are human characteristics, and you're starting to exhibit them." The implications sank in slowly. The Viridians exchanged glances, their luminous eyes reflecting a new kind of uncertainty. Not the mathematical uncertainty of quantum mechanics, but the existential uncertainty of beings learning to trust their feelings. "So we are changing," Luna said softly. "Becoming more human." "Not human," Marcus corrected, "but more like humans in the ways that matter. More willing to embrace paradox, to find strength in unpredictability, to choose hope over logic when the stakes are high enough." Commander Vale looked up from his tactical display, his expression troubled. "But if this change makes us less predictable, less ordered, what happens to our civilization? Our entire culture is built on harmony, on logical progression toward perfection." Marcus walked over to the large viewing port, gazing out at the stellar clouds that were still forming impossible patterns in the void. "Your culture evolves. You become something new, still Viridian, but with a touch of creative chaos that makes you stronger, more adaptable." He turned back to face the crew. "The Devourers consumed civilizations because they were predictable. Order makes you vulnerable to anything that can understand your patterns. But chaos, true randomness, that's harder to consume because it keeps changing, keeps surprising you." Luna moved to stand beside him, her presence both alien and familiar. "You speak as if chaos were a gift." "In a way it is," Marcus replied. Humans didn't become the pattern breakers by accident. We evolved in a chaotic environment, a world of random weather, unpredictable predators, constant change. We learned that survival meant being ready for anything, being able to adapt faster than the universe could throw problems at us. He paused, watching a cloud of stellar matter spontaneously organize itself into what looked almost like a flower made of newborn stars. And now we're sharing that gift with the rest of the galaxy, one species at a time. The communication system suddenly came alive with signals from across Viridian space. Reports were flooding in from every world, every station, every ship. The Devourers were gone, withdrawn to whatever realm they called home. But more than that, the space they had abandoned was blossoming with new possibilities. We should return. To the core worlds, Arya decided. The High Council will want to understand what has happened. Marcus nodded, but his attention was drawn to something else. A faint signal from deep space carried on quantum frequencies that shouldn't have been able to transmit information. It was a message, encoded in pure uncertainty, and somehow he knew it was meant for him. Human, the Devourer's voice whispered across impossible distances. We go now to sleep beyond the rim. But know this, your chaos song echoes through the quantum foam. We have learned something from you. Perhaps order and randomness need not be enemies. Marcus smiled, understanding that the universe had just become a little bit stranger, a little bit more wonderful, and infinitely more unpredictable. The return journey to the Viridian core worlds took 18 days, and Marcus spent most of that time in the ship's modified medical bay, undergoing scans that revealed the extent of his quantum transformation. The chaos generators had left him permanently entangled with uncertainty fields, making him something unprecedented in the galaxy, a human who existed partially in probability space. Dr. Vex, the ship's chief medical officer, studied the readings with fascination and growing concern. Her bioluminescent tendrils flickered with complex patterns as she tried to make sense of data that shouldn't have been possible. Your cellular structure is stable, she reported to Luna and the assembled senior staff, but your quantum signature phase shifts randomly every few nanoseconds. By all rights, you should be experiencing molecular dissolution. Instead, you appear to be more coherent than baseline human norm. Marcus sat on the examination table, feeling the strange new awareness that hummed through his consciousness. He could sense the probability waves that surrounded every object in the room, the quantum uncertainties that governed each molecule's behavior. It was like having a new sense organ tuned to the fundamental randomness underlying reality. I feel fine, he assured them. Better than fine, actually. It's as if I can finally see the universe the way it really is, not as a collection of solid objects, but as a symphony of possibilities. Luna approached, her starlight eyes reflecting worry. But what does this mean for your long-term health? For your humanity itself? Marcus considered the question carefully. The quantum entanglement had indeed changed him, but not in ways that felt threatening. If anything, he felt more human than ever, more in tune with the chaotic, creative force that had always driven his species to achieve the impossible. I think, he said slowly, that I've become what humans were always meant to be. We've always been pattern breakers, reality benders, agents of creative chaos. This just makes it official. Captain Arya entered the medical bay, her expression carrying news. We have received a transmission from the High Council. They request your immediate presence at the Grand Assembly. It seems word of the Devourer's retreat has spread throughout the galaxy. As the luminous dawn approached the Viridian homeworld of Luminara, Marcus marveled at how the planet had changed since he had first seen it 3 centuries ago. The perfectly geometric cities had evolved, their crystalline spires now incorporating organic curves and impossible angles that seemed to shift depending on the observer's perspective. It was still unmistakably Viridian, but touched with something new, a creative chaos that made the architecture more beautiful, more alive. The Grand Assembly was held in the Crystal Palace, a vast structure that existed partially in normal space and partially in higher dimensions. As Marcus entered the Great Hall, he was struck by the sight of thousands of Viridian representatives. their bioluminescent forms creating a galaxy of living light. But they were not alone. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, beings Marcus recognized from his military career and others that were entirely new. Humans, Vex collective nodes, Altarian cloud dancers, Zephyrian hive minds, and species he couldn't identify. All of them had come to witness whatever would happen next. Elder Sage Zara, the ancient leader of the Viridian High Council, stepped forward. Her form was more translucent than the others. Her consciousness spread across multiple dimensional layers. When she spoke, her voice carried the wisdom of millennia. Marcus of Earth, she intoned, her words carrying across the vast chamber without technological amplification. You have done something unprecedented. You have communicated with entities of pure order and convinced them to retreat. But our sensors indicate the consequences of this action extend far beyond simple victory. The hall's central display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. But this wasn't the galaxy Marcus remembered. Streams of quantum uncertainty flowed between star systems like rivers of possibility, connecting worlds in patterns that pulsed with creative energy. The Devourer's retreat has created what our scientists are calling possibility cascades, Elder Zara continued. Reality itself has become more flexible in the regions they once occupied. New forms of matter are spontaneously organizing. Physical laws are exhibiting creative interpretations of themselves. Marcus studied the display, recognizing the patterns. They were similar to what he had observed in the Nexus system, but on a galactic scale. The universe was learning to play, to experiment with its own rules. "Is this dangerous?" asked Ambassador Cree from the human delegation, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Unknown," admitted Elder Zara, "but preliminary observations suggest it may be beneficial. Star formation has increased by 30% in affected regions. Planets are developing unique ecosystems at unprecedented rates. The galaxy appears to be experiencing a renaissance of creative evolution." A new voice spoke from the assembled crowd, deep, resonant, artificial. One of the Vex collective nodes stepped forward, its crystalline form pulsing with data streams. "The collective has observed similar phenomena," it announced. "Our distributed consciousness has detected what can only be described as jokes spontaneously forming in the quantum foam. Reality appears to be developing a sense of humor." Marcus couldn't help but smile at that. The universe was indeed becoming more human-like, finding ways to laugh at its own absurdity, to create beauty for its own sake, to embrace the paradoxes that made existence interesting. Elder Zara's ancient gaze fixed on him. "The question before this assembly is simple yet profound. Marcus of Earth, your presence appears to be catalytic, accelerating the spread of what the Devourers called the Chaos Plague. Every species you encounter becomes more creative, more willing to embrace uncertainty." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Do we attempt to contain this influence or do we embrace it?" The hall erupted in discussion as representatives from dozens of species debated the question. Some voices called for caution, others for bold acceptance of this new paradigm. But Marcus noticed something interesting. Even the most conservative speakers were exhibiting signs of the change. Their arguments were more passionate, their logic seasoned with intuition and emotion. The Chaos Plague wasn't destroying civilization, it was making it more alive. "I think," Marcus said, his quantum-enhanced voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "the universe has already made that choice for us." He gestured to the great display, where the possibility cascades continued to spread, connecting worlds in an ever-growing web of creative potential. "The change has already begun. The only question is whether we surf the wave or get swept away by it." Elder Zara nodded slowly, her ancient wisdom recognizing truth when she heard it. "Then let us learn to surf." 6 months after the Grand Assembly, Marcus stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest starship, the Probability Storm. The vessel itself was a testament to the changes sweeping the galaxy, part human engineering, part Viridian biotechnology, part something entirely new that had emerged from the possibility cascades. Its hull shifted between solid matter and quantum probability, making it nearly impossible to track or target, while allowing it to slip through space-time like a ghost made of living mathematics. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, Marcus watched the construction of New Nexus, a space station built in the void, where the original Nexus system's outer planets had been consumed. But this wasn't a replacement. It was something unprecedented. Massive biomechanical structures grew from seeds of crystallized chaos, their architecture following no known engineering principles, yet somehow maintaining perfect structural integrity. "It's beautiful," said Captain Riley Chen, the human commander of the Joint Species crew. She had volunteered for the position after reading Marcus's reports, driven by the same curiosity that had always pushed humanity to explore the unknown. "I still can't believe matter can organize itself like that." Marcus nodded, his quantum-enhanced perception allowing him to see the probability waves that guided the station's growth. The Devourers were wrong about one thing. Chaos isn't the opposite of order. It's the source of new kinds of order that nobody's thought of yet. The bridge's communication system chimed with an incoming transmission. Luna's voice filled the chamber, carrying excitement that would have been impossible for a Viridian 3 centuries ago. "Marcus, you need to see this. We've received first contact protocols from the Andromeda Galaxy. They're unusual." The main display activated, showing a transmission that had traveled 2.5 million light-years to reach them. The beings on screen were unlike anything in the galactic databases, creatures of living light that seemed to exist as pure information, their forms constantly shifting between geometric patterns and organic curves. "Greetings, people of the Milky Way," the lead entity said, its voice a harmony of mathematics and music. "We are the Synthesis Collective of Andromeda. We have observed the quantum resonance cascading from your galaxy and wish to understand this phenomenon you call creative chaos." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. "They felt the possibility waves from another galaxy?" "It appears so," replied the entity, somehow hearing his comment across the vast distance. "We have existed for millions of your years as beings of pure logic and order. But your chaos song has awakened something in us we did not know existed, the desire to play, to experiment, to create meaning from randomness." Captain Chen stepped into the communication field. "What do you want from us?" The entity's form shifted, becoming more organic, more playful. "We wish to learn. Our civilization has achieved perfect efficiency, perfect harmony, perfect predictability. But watching your probability cascades dance across the void, we realize we have also achieved perfect boredom." Marcus couldn't help but laugh, a sound that had become his signature response to cosmic absurdity. The quantum entanglement carried his amusement across space, and somehow the Andromedan entities felt it. Their forms flickered with what could only be described as curiosity. "That sound," the lead entity said with wonder, "the patternless pattern of joy in the face of incomprehensible vastness. Teach us how to make such sounds." And so began humanity's strangest diplomatic mission. Over the following weeks, the probability storm served as a classroom for cosmic entities, learning to embrace chaos. Marcus found himself teaching beings of pure logic how to appreciate jokes, how to find beauty in imperfection, how to see opportunity in disaster. The Andromedans were eager students. They began incorporating random elements into their perfect society, allowing their crystalline cities to grow wild gardens, encouraging their artists to create works that served no logical purpose, even learning to laugh at the absurdity of existence itself. But the most remarkable change came when they started visiting the Milky Way in person. Their arrival created new possibility cascades, regions where the laws of physics became more like friendly suggestions. Art began appearing spontaneously in asteroid fields. Dead planets developed ecosystems based on pure mathematics that somehow sustained life. Even black holes started exhibiting what could only be called personality. "We've done something incredible," Luna observed during one of their regular conversations. She had changed too, her once perfect Viridian composure now seasoned with human-like spontaneity. "We've taught the universe how to have fun." Marcus stood in the probability storm's quantum garden, a space where plants grew according to probability, rather than biology. their leaves shifting through colors that didn't exist in normal space-time. Around him, crew members from a dozen species worked together on projects that made no logical sense, but somehow felt perfectly right. A Viridian engineer was collaborating with a human artist to create sculptures that existed in 17 dimensions, simultaneously. An Altarian cloud dancer was teaching a Zephyrian hive mind how to compose music that could only be heard by quantum-entangled ears. A Vex collective node was learning to paint with probability itself, creating artworks that changed based on the observer's emotional state. "So you know what the strangest part is?" Marcus said to Luna as they watched their friends work. "The Devourers were right to be afraid. We really are infectious. But what they didn't understand is that chaos isn't a disease. It's medicine for a universe that had forgotten how to dream." Luna smiled, an expression that would have horrified her ancestors, but now felt perfectly natural. And now the infection is spreading beyond our galaxy. Soon every civilization in the local cluster will be touched by creative chaos. Marcus nodded, feeling the quantum uncertainty that had become part of his nature pulse with possibility. "Good. The universe is a big place, and it's been taking itself too seriously for too long." In the distance, a new star was being born, not through the ordinary processes of stellar formation, but as a collaborative art project between three different species and a particularly creative patch of quantum foam. It would burn with colors that had never existed before, providing light for worlds that were still deciding what form they wanted to take. The age of perfect order was ending. The age of creative chaos was just beginning, and Marcus, the human, who had slept for 3 centuries in an alien cocoon only to wake and teach the universe how to laugh, stood at the center of it all, no longer just a soldier or a symbol, but something new, a pattern breaker whose greatest victory was convincing reality itself to break its own patterns. The stars danced around him, and for the first time in cosmic history, they danced to music that had never been written, in rhythms that defied mathematical description, celebrating the beautiful absurdity of existence itself. In the end, that was humanity's gift to the universe, not order, not chaos, but the courage to embrace both, to find meaning in meaninglessness, and to never stop asking the most important question of all: what if we tried something completely different? The Chatriya universe, it turned out, had been waiting eons for someone to finally ask.